Welcome back to Hudson Appliance for another episode of Wicked Good Food. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and today it's all about enchiladas. Enchiladas are one of my favorite things to eat in the world, but I never eat them and I never make them. I never think of it, and I don't know why, but we had them not too long ago and I said, I'm going to make these for my next show. So that's what we're going to do today. Using the inspiration of that nice corn tortilla that goes in the enchilada, we're also going to make some tortilla soup. We're going to make an enchilada sauce. It's going to go on top of our enchiladas. We're going to make a super quick and easy dirty rice, just using some salsa and some pretty basic rice. First thing we're going to do is we're going to season up our chicken. Now I have here boneless, skinless chicken thighs. Anytime I'm given the option of what to use for chicken, I'm always going to choose chicken thighs. I went through these real quick just to make sure there weren't any cartilage or bones or anything, but I didn't trim any of the fat off. That fat is going to give us some great flavor. There is some fat in there already, like I said, so I'm not going to add a ton of oil to this, but we do need to add a little bit of oil. And I'm going to mix all the seasonings right here in the bowl. I'm going to add some fresh ground black pepper. Some chili powder. Some cumin. If you're not familiar with cumin, next time you get a chance, smell it. As soon as I smell it, it brings me back to tacos and like taco seasoning. And that's essentially what we're making here. We're making our own kind of taco seasoning. And this is way better, way cheaper, and with way less salt and more flavor than the stuff you'll get at the store. This is some granulated garlic. Add some oregano. And some onion powder. There we go. Now I'm just going to take my tongs and just mix this together a bit. I'm not concerned that it's perfectly well mixed. All this stuff is going to get cooked. It's all going to end up getting shredded together. But I do want to distribute it a fair amount. Like I said before, there's already a little bit of fat on this chicken and we added some oil to it. So I'm not going to add any more fat to my pan. All right, that's pretty well coated. So I'm just going to take these and try to arrange them in a single layer right in my pan, and I want to pretty much cover the whole bottom of the pan, because the goal here is that we want contact with that pan, because when we develop a little bit of browning, it's going to develop some flavor. So I'm going to turn that up a bit and let that get going. We'll get this out of our way. So one of the cool things about the chicken enchiladas and this tortilla soup is they actually have very similar ingredients. We already talked about the tortilla, but they both have garlic in them. They both have onion. We're going to use some peppers and some other items. But I'm going to go ahead and cut some onion for both of these dishes. The top off our onion, stand it down so it doesn't go anywhere on us. Cut it right in half. I'm going to remove this. And this is a monstrous onion. I mean, this is like almost the size of my daughter's head. So we don't need that much of it. I'm just going to use half. Go ahead and peel this. We can hear our chicken starting to sizzle a little bit. It's about medium-high heat I have it on. Like I said, I'm not looking to crank it up too much. So the two things we're going to use this onion for are the enchilada sauce, which I'm going to puree after it's all done, and for the enchiladas themselves. So I could cut them real big and puree them for the sauce, but I'm going to cut them relatively small just so I cut them all the same. This part that's a little brown there, I'll remove that. So as always, I'm using the tip of my knife and just cutting through, taking care not to go through the core. Now I'll cut perpendicular to those. I'll just chop this up real quick. Beautiful. And essentially waste none of it. Oh, you know what I forgot? Forgot the most important thing of all, and that's some salt. I know I said I was going to have a little less salt, but that way it would be way less salt. All right, I'm just going to move these out of the way and move on to this, which is some garlic. And what I want to do is I'm going to take and cut off this end of the clove here. It's a little bit dried out. Move that out of the way. Grab our other big clove. Same thing, cut off this little end. And I'm going to hold it and just give it a little tap. This one needs another little tap. And what we're doing is actually smushing that clove of garlic a little bit, and it's exploding or cracking the skin, and it'll pop right out. And I believe I've said it before, but garlic actually has a good amount of sugar in it. And if you smash it all the way, those sugars will make the skin actually stick, and we don't want that. So now I'm going to take this clove of garlic, I'm going to hold it with the bolster of my knife, which is this part of my knife here, off the cutting board, and I'm going to give it a good smash. This one's a little bit big, and I don't want it to go all over the place here at Hudson Appliance, so we'll cut it first. Move it over this way and just give it a real quick chop. Now, I'm not super concerned that this is really fine. What I'm looking for here is just to get some more surface area. Like I said, we're going to puree our sauce, and in the enchiladas, it's going to get plenty of time to cook with everything else. Speaking of the enchiladas, I want to take a peek and just see. All right. We're getting a little bit of color on these, which is what we want. I'm going to flip them. All right, but we're going to start our sauce. The first thing we're going to put in here is some butter. Usually I like to use bacon fat, actually, but I happen to, which is kind of weird, but I don't have any bacon fat right now. I actually did a bunch of cooking at home and used it all up. Every time I cook bacon, though, I save all the fat. I just put it in a little container and throw it in the refrigerator so I can use it. This is a dish in particular. I love having the bacon fat because it adds a nice little bit of smokiness to it. It has a little bit of salt, too. But we're going to let this melt. I'm going to turn this up a bit more. We're going to go ahead and add onions right to it. And we're going to add some of our garlic. About half. That ends up being about a clove, maybe a little less than a clove. And I'm just going to actually use this whisk and stir it around a bit. Beautiful. And then we're also going to add some onions right to our chicken. Because when this is all done, like I said, we're going to break apart this chicken. You know, a really easy way to do this is to actually throw it in your mixer afterwards with the paddle and beat it all up. We're not going to do that. I'm just going to shred it with the knife a bit. But right now, right in this pan, I can go ahead and add my onions. So there are a lot of recipes for enchiladas that call for you to cook your chicken separately from everything else, and then have another pot and cook your onions and garlic and whatever else is going to go in there. I'm all about trying to use one pot whenever I can. So we're going to throw these in here, and these will actually cook right along with our chicken. All right, this has great, great smell to it. I'm going to turn this down a bit. So these onions have sweat a bit. We're not looking to get any color on them. And I'm going to add a really important ingredient here. And that's tomato paste. So tomato paste is one of those ingredients that we see around in our cupboard a lot, but we put it in a recipe because the recipe calls for it, but we don't necessarily understand what it does, but it is an awesome, awesome component. It's very acidic when you first pull it right out of the can. Taste it next time you open it. But as you cook it, it develops its richness. It's going to give this great body and color to our sauce. So I'm going to add our garlic in here. I didn't add it right away because I don't want it to burn, but we're going to let this keep cooking. This will take just a few more minutes, and I might add a little bit of liquid to it. We'll see. I'm going to let this cook for a good 5 or 7 minutes to let some of that acidity cook out. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll keep working on our sauce and check out our chicken. All right, we've given our tomato paste a chance to cook out just a little bit. Our chicken is just about done here. I added a little bit of water because I didn't like quite how brown it was getting. So I add a little bit of water. We're going to let that evaporate a little bit, let it finish cooking there. The next step here for our sauce is to add our flour. So I have just some all-purpose flour here, and I want to add about equal parts as what I added for the fat in the beginning. So I have a little bit more than a tablespoon, because that bacon fat's a little heavier than the flour is, so we need a little bit more flour. And that looks maybe just a little more. Now I've turned my heat down really low. It's on 3 out of 10. And I just want to let it cook slowly now. We're going to cook some of the starch out of that flour and get some of that out of the whisk there. Let that cook nice and slow. So on to our soup. Some of the ingredients we're going to use in our soup we're going to cut up right now. One of them is we're going to use some more onion. This time we'll use a red onion though, I think, in our soup. We'll cut it the same way. We're going to add a bit of onion to the soup, but also I want to save some for a garnish right on the top. I like the idea of some of the really fine diced but raw onion right on the top. So these, I'm going to do the same process, but I'm going to make a point to try to make very fine cuts. All right. All right, now looking over at our chicken that's cooking, it's done. It's definitely done. There's a little bit more liquid that I want, but we can drain that out. So I'm going to shut that all the way off and just get this back out of the way. It's important that that gets a chance to cool down because the other ingredients that we put in there, one of them is cheese, and we don't want it to melt the cheese, the warmth of the chicken. All right, so we've got our onions really finely diced for our garnish and for in our soup. I like the color of bell peppers, so we're going to use a red, a yellow, and a green. So I'm going to cut the tops and bottoms off. Cut right down, use my knife. I'm just going to follow the shape of the pepper right around, never cutting towards myself. Then I have all my waste right here, and I've got this beautiful piece of pepper right here that I can cut. Now all this, except for the stem part, is all good pepper to use as well. So we can take this and just go through, slice and dice. And I'm looking over here at our sauce, and I think the heat can be up just a bit more, so I'm going to turn it up a bit. And I don't need a super lot of our pepper, so I'm not going to take the time to cut it all. That's probably plenty of that one. We'll do our green pepper. So if it falls out on you, that's no big deal. Just move it off to the side. Same thing though, never cut towards yourself. Grab it, cut away from yourself. So I'm going to give a quick dice to this green pepper. So this tortilla soup gets its name from the tortillas that are in it. So it's actually a slightly thickened soup. The thickening comes from actual tortillas. I like to use tortilla chips and throw them in there. Some people use cornmeal, which is the basis of making tortillas in it. But I like to actually throw in fried tortilla chips and use some as garnish as well. So do the same thing with our yellow pepper here. Whoops. Want to make sure we don't serve the sticker. Missed that when I washed them. So dice a little bit of this. All right, and that's perfect. Now, we're going to come over to our sauce quickly. So this has had a chance to cook out enough. The flour's cooked out. All right, I'm going to pull it off the heat just a bit. You guys can take a look at that. Now, we just made a roux. One of the things that's important about when we're going to add our liquid to our roux is that our roux and our liquid cannot both be hot. What happens if they are is that as soon as you add your liquid, everything thickens. Your roux doesn't have a chance to dissolve, so you end up with little roux balls. And as we've said before, nobody likes roux balls floating around their mouth. So we're going to go ahead and add our chicken broth to this relatively quickly. And this is just room temperature. And I'm going to wing it on how much I put in, knowing that I can always add more. But now I can return this to the heat, and I just want to stir it until it comes back up to a simmer. But this will give us enough time for the roux to dissolve. So I'm going to let this come up to a simmer. clean up our mess a little bit. I'll get our chicken ready because that same chicken's going to go in our enchiladas and into our soup. Okay, so our sauce has started to thicken. It's actually simmered for a few minutes, which is what we want. It's thickened relatively nicely. I'm going to pull my whisk out, and I have plugged in right here our immersion blender. So I'm going to stick this in here, and I'm going to look just to puree up what's in there. I'm going to tilt it so that all the sauce goes down one side, and just kind of pulse it, because I don't want to make a big mess. And what we're looking for is just to get rid of any chunks of onion that are in any real big chunks. And there we go. Done. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not worried that it's absolutely perfect. If you are, go ahead and strain it. You know, you can send it through a strainer, or you can keep pureeing it more and more. Stick that under here, actually. Now, one thing is we haven't seasoned this very much. So I'm going to go ahead and season it with some cumin. I really like a little cumin in there. And I'm going to put in some chili powder. And a generous pinch of salt. I just want to give that a stir. But it's got a really nice thickness now. It smells fantastic. I just want to give it a taste to make sure we're on the right track here. It's good. You can really, excuse me, you can really taste the bacon fat in there. It needs a little bit more salt. But I think our sauce is good. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. And just remove this to the back. Now here we have our chicken. Our chicken's fully cooked. What I'm going to do is bring it over, and I'm just going to cut it on our cutting board. So this chicken is going to be the chicken both for our soup and for our enchiladas. So just want to get it on here, and I'm going to give it a quick rough chop. Now you can use a couple forks and shred it all if you want. But I'm perfectly content with doing this. You know, when I've made enchiladas for big groups of people, oftentimes I'll take the chicken from this point and throw it in our big mixer with the paddle and just let it go through and shred it. But this will be perfect for what we're doing. Great. I'm just going to go the other way a couple times just because I want to make sure they're relatively small pieces. All right, perfect. Now, we're going to go ahead and start making our soup. So I have this saucepan here. I'm going to turn this on. And I could use some more bacon fat in there, but I'm going to use vegetable oil. I don't want it to be too smoky, our soup. So I'm going to use this oil here, coat the bottom of our pan. And I have here our celery, excuse me, our celery and our peppers. So these are going to go right into our pan. We're going to sweat those first. In the meantime, I'm going to take this bowl out, get this out of the way, and I'm going to start to make our enchilada filling. So that's going to have our cooked chicken in it. That's about good. Now the rest of this chicken here is going to end up going in our soup eventually. Now, all the liquid that's in this pan here, we're going to put in our soup. But I want to try to get a bunch of the solids out. So that's that onion and garlic that we cooked up earlier, that we cut up earlier. Beautiful. All right, and that will just stay in reserve there. I'm gonna wipe off my hand real quick. So, oh yeah, that's gonna be perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Looking at some of the other ingredients we have here, we have our tomatoes. I'm gonna add diced tomatoes to this, but there's all the liquid in here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add this liquid here with this, which is all gonna end up going with our soup. That's right, if some chunks of tomato get in there. So I wanna add our tomatoes. Give this a little stir. We're not looking to saute this. That's why we started with a cold pan. We're just looking to sweat it. We want the vegetables to release some of their juices in there. All right, I have a jalapeno here, which we can certainly use this jalapeno. I don't want to make it too spicy. I know Arthur's not a huge fan of spicy stuff. But what I do have here are these Rotel tomatoes. And so they're a diced tomato with chilies. And I had never even heard about these things. And my roommate, Sam, this is probably 7 years ago, was like, get me a can of Rotel. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. She thought I was an idiot because I had never heard of Rotel before. But she had spent a lot of time in Texas and was out in Colorado, and this is something they have all the time, and now I use it all the time. It is a great spice as well as some of those, some of the flavor of the diced tomatoes. That's gonna actually end up going in our soup to give it a little spice, but we can throw a little in here, why not? Just a little bit. So we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna let this sweat a little more. I'm gonna clean up my mess. We'll put all the other ingredients together. We'll finish our soup actually and get ready to put our enchiladas in the oven. All right, so our vegetables have sweat. They're looking perfect here. I grated some cheese for our enchilada filling. I got some of our other mise en place here. I'm gonna go ahead and add, I dumped the chicken and all the juices in together. I'm gonna go ahead and add, I dumped all the chicken and all the juices together. Now pour all this right in here with those sweat veggies. And we're all done with that now. So to our soup, we're gonna add some black beans, just like so. We said we're gonna add some of these Rotel tomatoes with a little spice to them. We'll add them all, why not? That's perfect. Then looking at our enchilada filling, we're gonna add some corn. So it's a nice sweet frozen corn. We're not in really a corn season, so frozen's the way to go. I'm gonna add some to our soup too, because why not? And then to our enchilada filling, I'm gonna add this cheese. I like a lot of cheese, so we're gonna add just about that much. And just fold this together. So now we've got our chicken, our corn, our tomatoes, our cheese, all the seasonings that went in with all that stuff in here. And that's it for the filling for our enchiladas. We're gonna let that be. I'm going to turn up our heat on our soup a bit. We do need to add our chicken broth. And we wanna bring that up a little bit higher than the level of our, of all the solids that's in there. So that's about perfect. Then, for a little bit of acidity to that, we're gonna use the rest of this cheese as a garnish in a couple minutes. But for a little acidity to our soup, we're gonna add fresh lime. And I'm just gonna squeeze it right over it. This is a pretty big, pretty juicy lime. I'm just gonna use half of it. This is probably yielding me a little more than 2 tablespoons. I'll give it a stir with that. But look at all the chunks in there. Look at that soup. All that chicken, all those beautiful, beautiful colors. So we're gonna let that come up to a simmer. Now, I wanna just move this stuff out of the way, and we're gonna start building our enchiladas. But before we build them, we're gonna take this pan and our sauce, and we're gonna put a little bit of sauce in the bottom. Just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. And I'm just gonna kind of move this around like so to coat it. And this is gonna help our enchiladas from sticking. So now, I take our corn tortilla. That's the most important thing about this whole process, is that you use a corn tortilla. And I wanna put a couple tablespoons of filling, but you don't wanna overdo it. Simply gonna roll it up like this. Take it seam side down, Put it right in your pan. So our soup's gonna come up to a simmer. I'm gonna finish rolling up all our enchiladas. We'll get them in the pan. I'll show you how we get them in the oven and how we start that rice. And then it's about time to get Arthur up here. Simmer, I just turned it down a second. Enchiladas are all rolled up. So now I'm gonna put some more sauce right on top of the enchiladas. And I wanna try to get them down in between each one too. All right, we'll get this out of the way. And I'm just gonna use a spoon here to spread this out. So the sauce is really important. It's gonna help keep all the tortillas moist. Now, if you want, you can actually take all your enchiladas after they're made and roll them in the sauce to make sure they're completely coated. You can even have a plate with sauce in it, dip them in the sauce, and then roll them like that, but this works just fine. So that's it. I'm gonna cover this with some cheese. Perfect. And I have a 350-degree convection oven going. And those will take 15 or 20 minutes. You wanna make sure they get heated all the way through. So our soup here, like I said, came up to a simmer. The one thing we have to add is its namesake. We're gonna add tortillas to it. And like I said, I like to use just regular fried tortilla chips, and I'm gonna break them up. They don't have to be broken up perfect. Just wanna break up some of them and drop them right in there. So as this sits here and cooks for a couple more minutes, these are gonna totally absorb moisture that's around them, and they're gonna thicken our soup. So we're gonna let this cook for another minute or two. Enchiladas, let them get nice and brown. We'll get Arthur up here and see what he thinks. Hey, Arthur.
Hey, Matt. How you doing?
Excellent. Yourself?
Good. This looks like a yummy, yummy one.
It is. I know you just got back from Mexico, but I thought we'd do a little bit of Mexican-inspired food here.
Okay.
We only made 2 dishes, but there's a lot going on with these 2 dishes. First one we have here is tortilla soup. So it's chicken-based soup. We cooked some chicken, and that's loaded with a bunch of vegetables. Peppers and onions and corn and beans, and just filled with a lot of flavor, and some tomatoes in there.
Okay.
It's actually thickened by crushing up some tortilla chips, throwing them right into the soup, and then there's just a bunch of garnishes on there. The other thing we made was chicken enchiladas.
Okay.
Literally the exact same chicken. I just took half the chicken and put it in enchiladas, half in the soup. So kind of saving some steps as we went along. It's mixed with some cheese and some corn, and we made a kind of rich, chickeny, tomatoey sauce that goes on the top. What do you want to try first?
Let's try the soup.
All right. It's nice. We both have our own bowls this time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
One of the things I didn't mention was a big squeeze of lime in there. You can get just a little bit of that lime juice in there. Yeah. Yeah, that came out nice.
Let's dig into
We've got our enchilada there. Yeah, it should be fork tender. So the key with making these enchiladas is using the corn tortillas. Usually we use the flour tortillas, those flour wraps,
Yeah.
but the corn one really makes a difference.
Now that's
Wicked good.